David Miller never imagined he'd find himself in a situation straight out of one of those dramatic YouTube videos he used to watch for entertainment. It all began on an ordinary Tuesday morning when he received an unusual envelope in the mail. The lack of a return address and the two stamps in the upper right corner caught his attention. The handwritten address made him think it might be from an old college buddy trying to reconnect. As he opened the envelope, he was met with a brief, anonymous letter. "Dear Mr. Miller, I am sending you this letter to inform you that your wife, Jessica, has been having an affair with her boss, Brian Carter. He is involved with multiple women. I felt you deserved to know the truth. Sincerely, a concerned citizen." David read the letter multiple times, his mind reeling. The anonymity of the author, the lack of concrete evidence, and the mention of multiple women were hard to digest. He had seen Brian Carter once when he dropped Jessica off at work. Brian was a tall, bald man with an unremarkable appearance, certainly not someone who fit Jessica's type. David decided to take the letter with a grain of salt. Confronting Jessica without evidence would be futile and could drive the affair underground if it was true. He needed proof. David, 35, and Jessica, 33, had been together since college and married shortly after. They had 3 children: Ethan, 9, Olivia, 7, and Ava, 5. Jessica had been a stay-at-home mom while David served in the military. Their life had been stable, though Jessica wasn't thrilled when David left the military to start a corporate job. Determined to uncover the truth, David purchased a GPS tracker online. He installed it in Jessica's car, feeling a mix of guilt and resolve. On Friday, during lunch, he noticed the GPS signal indicating that Jessica's car was parked in an unfamiliar location. It wasn't near her workplace, the grocery store, or the kids' school. Instead, it was on the other side of town, at a place they rarely visited. David's heart pounded as he Googled the location and discovered it was Lakeside Hotel. He requested permission to leave work early and drove towards the hotel, his mind racing with questions and suspicions. As he approached the location, he noticed the GPS signal moving back towards Jessica's workplace. He had just missed her. Disappointed but undeterred, David returned home, trying to act normal. That night, Jessica mentioned how her female co-workers were jealous of the attention she was getting from Brian. She proudly shared that she had received the best quarterly reviews and had been recognized as Employee of the Month 3 times already. While David wanted to be happy for her, the letter E's warning echoed in his mind. Realizing he needed professional help, David decided to hire a private investigator. The next morning, he found Sam Reynolds on Craigslist. Sam, though not a licensed investigator, had a good camera phone and agreed to follow Jessica during her lunch hours for a reasonable fee. David shared the details of the Lakeside Hotel incident and provided Sam with a GPS tracking app to monitor Jessica's movements. The following week, from Monday to Thursday, nothing unusual happened. Jessica's routine seemed normal, but on Friday, Sam alerted David that Jessica was heading towards Lakeside Hotel again. Sam arrived before her and recorded her entering the hotel. 3 hours later, he captured Brian leaving the hotel and Jessica following shortly after. David's worst fears were confirmed. He had the evidence he needed. Sam sent him all the recordings and pictures, which David compiled into a video. That evening, he arrived home before Jessica, his mind made up. When Jessica walked through the door, David summoned her to the kitchen. With a calmness that surprised even him, he showed her the video on his laptop. Jessica's face turned pale as she watched herself enter the hotel, followed by Brian. Tears welled up in her eyes and she began to apologize, but David silenced her, insisting she watch the entire video. Once the video ended, David's anger erupted. He demanded an explanation. Jessica admitted to the affair, claiming it had been going on for 2 months. She insisted it was a one-time mistake, that she didn't care about Brian, and couldn't explain why she had done it. Her excuses only fueled David's rage. He ordered her to leave, unable to stand the sight of her. That night, David struggled to care for the kids alone. He had never been this involved in their routines, and it showed. His mind raced with thoughts of betrayal and hurt. Jessica's absence was glaring, and he couldn't help but feel the weight of her actions crushing him. The first chapter of David's new reality had begun, marked by betrayal and the painful unraveling of a once stable life. David Miller sat alone in his living room, the glow from the television casting shadows on the walls. The children were asleep, unaware of the storm brewing within their family. David's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one darker than the last. He replayed the events of the past few days over and over, trying to make sense of them. How could Jessica do this to him, to their family? The next morning, David awoke with a heavy heart. He went through the motions of preparing breakfast for Ethan, Olivia, and Ava, his mind elsewhere. Jessica had spent the night at her sister Amanda's house, and David was grateful for the reprieve. He needed time to think, to figure out his next move. Jessica called later that morning, her voice filled with regret and desperation. "David, please let me come home. I know I messed up, but we need to talk. For the kids' sake, if nothing else." David clenched his jaw, the anger bubbling just below the surface. "We'll talk, Jessica, but not today. I need more time." Jessica's sobs on the other end of the line did little to move him. He hung up, his decision firm. He wasn't ready to face her yet. As the days passed, David's suspicion grew. He couldn't help but question everything Jessica had told him. Was it really just a 2-month affair? Was Brian the only one? The anonymous letter had mentioned multiple women. What if there were others? David decided to delve deeper. He began by checking Jessica's phone, something he had avoided before. He knew her password and went through her messages. Most were innocuous, but a few stood out. Texts with Brian that seemed overly friendly, though nothing explicitly incriminating. It wasn't tea enough. Determined to uncover more, David visited Brian's workplace, Carter Distribution. He parked a distance away and watched the building, noting the comings and goings of employees. He spotted Brian, interacting with his staff, and couldn't help but feel a surge of hatred. This man had not only betrayed his wife, but had also torn apart David's family. Later that evening, David called Sam Reynolds, the private investigator. "Sam, I need you to dig deeper. Find out if there are other women involved with Brian. I need to know everything." Sam agreed, and the investigation intensified. Meanwhile, David tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy for his children. He took them to school, helped with homework, and tucked them into bed each night. Yet, the shadow of Jessica's betrayal loomed large, casting a pall over their interactions. One evening, while tucking Olivia into bed, she looked up at him with wide eyes. "Daddy, when is Mommy coming home?" "David." His heart ached at the question. "Soon, sweetheart. Mommy needs some time to think, just like Daddy does." Olivia nodded, seeming to accept the answer, but David knew he couldn't keep them in the dark forever. The children deserved the truth, or at least a version of it that they could understand. A few days later, Sam called with an update. "David, I've found something. There are rumors among the staff at Carter Distribution about Brian's inappropriate relationships with other female employees. Some of them have mentioned feeling pressured by him, but they are too scared to come forward." David's grip tightened on the phone. "Keep digging, Sam. I need concrete evidence." As David awaited further news from Sam, he continued to wrestle with his emotions. He oscillated between anger and sadness, between wanting to confront Jessica and wanting to forget she ever existed. His friends and family noticed the change in him, but he couldn't bring himself to share the details of his turmoil. One evening, as he sat in the living room, Amanda showed up at the door. She had always been close to David, almost like a sister. Her concern was evident in her eyes. "David, we need to talk," she said softly. "Jessica is a mess. She knows she's messed up, and she is desperate to make things right." David sighed, motioning for her to sit. "Amanda, I don't know if I can ever forgive her. She destroyed everything we had." Amanda reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "I know, David, but for the kids' sake, you need to at least try to talk to her. She's willing to do whatever it takes to fix this." David rubbed his temples, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "I'll think about it, Amanda, but I can't promise anything." That night, as David lay in bed, his mind raced with thoughts of betrayal, anger, and the possibility of forgiveness. He knew that confronting Jessica was inevitable, but he needed more time. The investigation had to continue. He needed to know the full extent of her betrayal before he could decide their future. As the days turned into weeks, David's resolve hardened. He was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The tension and intrigue of the situation grew, each new piece of information adding to the complex web of deceit. David Miller's life had been turned upside down, but he was ready to face whatever came next. The story was far from over, and the climax was yet to come. David Miller woke up to another day of uncertainty. The nights where the hardest sleep came in fits, plagued by dreams that twisted his memories into nightmares. The children were his only anchor, and their morning routine was a brief respite from his torment. As he prepared breakfast, the phone buzzed with a message from Sam Reynolds. "Meet me at Blue Ridge Diner at noon. I have some updates." David's heart raced. This could be the breakthrough he needed. He dropped the kids off at school and spent the rest of the morning pacing around the house, anticipation and dread mingling in equal measure. By the time noon approached, he was more than ready for answers. Blue Ridge Diner was bustling with lunchtime patrons, the chatter and clinking of utensils providing a comforting background noise. David spotted Sam in a corner booth, a stack of folders and a laptop spread out before him. He looked up as David approached, his expression serious. "David, have a seat," Sam said, gesturing to the booth. "I've uncovered some things that you need to see." David slid into the booth, his eyes fixed on the investigator. "What did you find?" Sam opened one of the folders and handed David a series of photographs. They showed Jessica entering and leaving Lakeside Hotel with Brian Carter, but there were also images of other women, all seemingly involved with Brian. "Brian's been busy," Sam said grimly. "He's been having affairs with multiple women at Carter Distribution. Some of them have come forward, but they are scared. They fear losing their jobs or worse, retaliation from Brian." David felt a cold anger settle over him. These women, are they willing to talk? "Some of them, yes," Sam replied. "But they need assurance that they all be protected. Brian has a lot of influence at the company." David nodded, his mind racing. "What about Jessica? Did you find anything else on her?" Sam hesitated before pulling out another set of photos. "I followed her to a few more places. She's been meeting with Brian regularly, but there's no indication she is involved with anyone else. It seems like she has just caught up in this mess with him." David's fists clenched. "This isn't just about an affair. It is about power and manipulation. Brian's using his position to exploit these women, including my wife." Sam leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "What do you want to do next?" David stared at the photographs, a plan forming in his mind. "We need to gather more evidence, enough to bring Brian down and protect these women. If we can expose him, the company will have no choice but to take action." Sam nodded, closing the folders. "I'll keep digging. In the meantime, you need to confront Jessica. She needs to know that you are aware of the full extent of this situation." David left the diner with a renewed sense of purpose. The confrontation he had been dreading was now inevitable. He drove home, his mind a whirlwind of strategies and emotions. He had to stay calm, focused. For the sake of his children, and for the women caught in Brian's web, he had to see this through. That evening, David waited for Jessica to come home. When she walked through the door, looking exhausted and wary, he felt a pang of guilt. Despite everything, he still cared for her, but that care was now overshadowed by the need for truth. "Jessica, we need to talk," he said, his voice steady. She looked at him, her eyes filled with apprehension. "David, I know I messed up. I'm so sorry. Please, just give me a chance to explain." David held up a hand, silencing her. "I know about Brian. I know about the other women. This isn't just about us anymore. It is about stopping him from hurting anyone else." Jessica's face crumpled, and she sank into a chair. "I didn't know what to do, David. He has so much power at work. I felt trapped." David sat across from her, his gaze unwavering. "I need you to tell me everything. No more lies, no more secrets. If we are going to stop him, we need the truth." Through tears and halting breaths, Jessica recounted how the affair began, how Brian had singled her out, praising her work and offering her opportunities in exchange for favors, how she had initially resisted, but eventually succumbed to his relentless pressure. Her story mirrored that of the other women Sam had found, a pattern of exploitation and fear. David listened, his anger simmering. "We're going to bring him down, Jessica, but I need you to cooperate fully. This isn't just about revenge, it's about justice." Jessica nodded, wiping her tears. "I'll do whatever it takes, David. I am so sorry. I just want to make things right." The next few days were a blur of planning and gathering evidence. Sam worked tirelessly, interviewing the other women and compiling their testimonies. David met with a lawyer to discuss the legal ramifications and how best to protect everyone involved. Finally, they were ready. David called a meeting with the heads of Carter Distribution, presenting the evidence they had gathered. The atmosphere was tense, the room filled with disbelief and outrage as the extent of Brian S.'s actions came to light. The company's legal team promised swift action, and Brian was placed on immediate leave, pending a full investigation. David returned home, exhausted but relieved. He had taken the first step towards justice, but the road ahead was still long. He found Jessica in the kitchen, her eyes red from crying. "Thank you, David," she said softly, "for believing in me, for giving me a chance to make things right." David sighed, the weight of the past weeks pressing down on him. "This isn't over, Jessica. We still have a lot to work through. But for now, let's focus on our children. They need us to be strong." Jessica nodded, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "We'll get through this, David. Together." As they embraced, David felt a spark of optimism. The journey ahead would be challenging, but he was determined to see it through, for his family, for the women at Carter Distribution, and for his own peace of mind. The battle was far from over, but he was ready for whatever came next. David Miller sat at the kitchen table, his mind a whirlwind of emotions and strategies. The evidence he had gathered against Brian Carter was solid, and the company had promised swift action. But now he faced the hardest part, confronting Jessica with the full extent of what he knew and deciding the future of their marriage. Jessica entered the kitchen, her steps hesitant. She had been trying to keep a low profile, sensing David's turmoil but unsure of how to bridge the growing chasm between them. She sat across from him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of forgiveness or understanding. "David," she began, her voice trembling, "I know I've hurt you. I am so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." David took a deep breath, steadying himself. "Jessica, I have heard your apologies, and I believe you regret what happened. But this isn't just about the affair. It's about everything that came with it. The lies, the manipulation, the fear. It is about Brian using his power to exploit you and other women at work." Jessica's eyes widened. "You know about the others?" David nodded. "Sam found them. Their stories are just like yours. Brian's been using his position to take advantage of women for years. We've exposed him to the company, and they are taking action. But we need to talk about us, Jessica, about what happens next." Jessica looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring nervously. "I'll do whatever it takes, David. I want to make this right. I want to save our family." David's expression softened slightly. "I believe you, Jessica. But trust doesn't come back overnight. We need to rebuild it step by step, and that starts with honesty, complete honesty." Jessica nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I promise, David. No more lies. I'll do anything to make things right." David reached out, taking her hand. "We'll get through this. It's going to be hard, but we'll get through it, for the kids and for us." The next few weeks were a test of their resolve. David and Jessica attended couples therapy, working through the pain and betrayal that had shattered their marriage. They spent hours talking, sometimes arguing, but slowly they began to find common ground. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Jessica turned to David. "Do you ever think we can go back to the way things were, before all of this?" David sighed, contemplating her question. "I don't think we can ever go back, Jessica. But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we can build something better, stronger, something that can withstand the storms." Jessica leaned her head on his shoulder, a sense of peace washing over her. "I hope so, David. I really hope so." Meanwhile, Sam continued to gather more testimonies from other victims of Brian S. manipulation. The company launched a full-scale investigation, and the media caught wind of the scandal. Brian S.'s reputation was in tatters, and he was facing legal action from several of his former employees. One afternoon, David received a call from the company's legal team. "Mr. Miller, we wanted to inform you that Brian Carter has been terminated from his position and is facing several lawsuits. Your efforts in exposing his actions have been invaluable." David thanked them, feeling a sense of closure. Brian had finally been held accountable for his actions, and the women he had hurt could start to heal. Back at home, the changes in Jessica were noticeable. She was more attentive to the children, more involved in their lives. She had quit her job at Carter Distribution and was considering going back to school to pursue a new career. The family began to find a new rhythm, one that included open communication and shared responsibilities. One evening, as David was helping Ethan with his homework, Olivia and Ava burst into the room giggling. "Daddy, come play with us!" they chorused, their faces beaming with joy. David smiled, feeling a warmth he hadn't felt in months. Okay, let's go play." Jessica watched from the doorway, her heart swelling with gratitude. She knew they had a long way to go, but for the first time in a long while, she felt hopeful about their future. As David played with the children, he glanced up at Jessica, their eyes meeting. In that moment, he realized that while their journey had been painful, it had also brought them closer in ways he hadn't thought possible. They had faced the darkness together and were emerging stronger on the other side. The battle against Brian was over, but the journey to rebuild their family was just beginning. And for the first time, David felt ready to embrace the challenges ahead, knowing that they would face them together. David Miller sat in his lawyer's office, a sense of resolve settling over him. Exposing Brian Carter had been a significant victory, but there were still loose ends to tie up. He needed to ensure that Jessica and the other women were protected and that Brian faced the full consequences of his actions. David's lawyer, Susan Grant, was a sharp, no-nonsense attorney with a reputation for tenacity. She listened intently as David laid out the details of the past few weeks. "Susan, we have the testimonies of several women, the video evidence, and the company's acknowledgement of Brian's misconduct." "What's our next step?" David asked, his voice steady but laced with determination. Susan leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing in thought. "We need to file a civil lawsuit against Brian for sexual harassment and emotional distress. This will not only hold him accountable but also set a precedent that such behavior will not be tolerated. Additionally, we can push for criminal charges, given the severity of his actions." David nodded, feeling a sense of justice. "And what about Jessica? Can we ensure she won't face any retaliation?" Susan smiled reassuringly. "We'll include a clause in the settlement to protect her and the other victims. Brian's influence is waning, but we need to make sure they were safe from any backlash." As they finalized the details, David felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice for Jessica and the other women. He left Susan's office with a clear plan and headed home, ready to share the news with Jessica. That evening, David and Jessica sat at the dining table, the children already tucked into bed. David explained the legal steps they were taking and reassured her that Susan was confident about their case. Jessica listened, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. "David, I am scared. What if he tries to retaliate? What if this drags on for years?" David reached across the table, taking her hand. "We'll face it together, Jessica. We have a strong case, and Susan is one of the best. We're doing this not just for us, but for all the women he has hurt. We can't let him get away with it." Jessica nodded, squeezing his hand. "Thank you, David, for standing by me, for fighting for us. I don't know what I would do without you." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and media attention. News of Brian's actions had spread, and the case became a high-profile example of workplace harassment. David and Jessica had to navigate the scrutiny, but they remained united in their resolve. One afternoon, David received a call from an unexpected source. "Mr. Miller, this is Detective Harris from the local precinct. We've been investigating Brian Carter based on the evidence you and the victims provided. I'd like to discuss the case further. Can you come down to the station? David's pulse quickened. Of course, Detective. I'll be there within the hour. At the station, Detective Harris laid out the progress of the investigation. We've gathered enough evidence to press criminal charges against Brian. He is facing multiple counts of sexual harassment and coercion. We believe he used his position to exploit his employees, and we have witnesses ready to testify. David felt a wave of relief. Thank you, Detective. This means a lot to us, especially to the women he has hurt. Detective Harris nodded. We are committed to seeing justice served, but I need to warn you, Mr. Miller. Brian has hired a formidable defense team. They all try to discredit the victims and minimize his actions. It is going to be a tough battle. David's jaw tightened. We are ready for it. We want to back down. As the criminal case moved forward, David and Jessica found themselves drawn even closer together. The legal battle was exhausting, but it also brought moments of clarity and connection. They spent evenings discussing their future, making plans for the life they wanted to rebuild. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Jessica turned to David, her eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and determination. David, I've been thinking about going back to school. I want to pursue a degree in social work. I want to help others who have been through what we have. David smiled, pride swelling in his chest. That's a wonderful idea, Jessica. You have so much to offer, and I'll support you every step of the way. Jessica leaned into him, finding comfort in his presence. We've been through so much, but I feel like we are coming out stronger on the other side. I couldn't have done this without you. David wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. We are a team, Jessica. We'll face whatever comes next together. The legal battle against Brian Carter continued to unfold, with new evidence and testimony surfacing. The media followed the case closely, highlighting the courage of the victims and the relentless pursuit of justice. David and Jessica remained steadfast, their resolve unshaken. One day, Susan called with news that brought a sense of closure. David, we've reached a settlement with Brian's legal team. He/s agreed to a substantial financial compensation for the victims, and he/s facing criminal charges that could lead to significant jail time. David felt a weight lift from his shoulders. That's incredible news, Susan. Thank you for everything you've done. Susan's voice was warm. It is not over yet, but this is a significant victory. You and Jessica should be proud of what you've accomplished. That evening, David and Jessica celebrated with a quiet dinner at home. They toasted to their perseverance, to the justice they had fought for, and to the future they were building together. As they sat together, enjoying the moment, David looked at Jessica, his heart full of hope. We did it, Jessica. We made it through. Jessica smiled, her eyes shining with tears of relief and joy. Yes, we did. And we'll keep moving forward, one step at a time. The battle against Brian Carter had been arduous, but it had also forged an unbreakable bond between David and Jessica. They had faced the darkness together and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the future with hope and determination. David knew that the road ahead would still have its challenges, but he also knew that with Jessica by his side, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. Together, they were ready to face whatever came next, united in their love and their commitment to justice and healing. David Miller found himself in a place he hadn't been in years, a therapist's office. The room was warm and inviting, with soft lighting and comfortable chairs. Across from him sat Dr. Ellen Marks, a seasoned therapist who specialized in trauma and relationship issues. David had been reluctant to seek help at first, but the weight of recent events had become too much to bear alone. David, it is good to see you again, Dr. Marks began, her voice soothing. How have you been since our last session? David sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's been tough. The legal battle against Brian, dealing with the media, trying to support Jessica and the kids. It feels like I am carrying the world on my shoulders. Dr. Marks nodded, her gaze compassionate. That is understandable, given everything you've been through. Let us start with what has been weighing on you the most. David took a deep breath. I think it is the betrayal, not just from Jessica, but from the system that allowed Brian to get away with this for so long. And there is this constant fear that it could happen again, that I might not be enough to keep my family safe. Dr. Marks leaned forward slightly. It's as important to acknowledge those feelings, David. Betrayal and fear are powerful emotions, and they can take a toll on your mental health. Have you been able to talk to Jessica about these fears? David shook his head. Not really. She has been so focused on trying to make things right, on moving forward. I don't want to burden her with my insecurities. Dr. Marks smiled gently. But part of healing is being able to share your vulnerabilities with each other. It's not about burdening her, it's about being honest and open, which is essential for rebuilding trust. David nodded slowly. You are right. I need to talk to her. I need to let her know what I'm feeling. Later that evening, after the kids were in bed, David and Jessica sat on the porch, the cool night air wrapping around them. David took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. Jessica, there's something I need to talk to you about, he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Jessica turned to him, her eyes filled with concern. Of course, David. What's on your mind? David looked into her eyes, finding strength in her gaze. I've been carrying a lot of fear and anger. Fear that this could happen again. Anger at the betrayal and at the system that let it happen. I haven't been fair to you by keeping this inside. I need you to know how I am feeling. Jessica reached out, taking his hand in hers. David, I'm so sorry you've been feeling this way. I want to be here for you, just like you've been here for me. We need to face these fears together. David squeezed her hand, a sense of relief washing over him. Thank you, Jessica. It means a lot to me. I know we've both been through so much, but talking about it helps. Jessica nodded, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. We'll get through this, David. One step at a time, just like you said. As they sat in silence, holding hands, David felt a sense of peace. They were starting to rebuild, piece by piece, and it was the small moments of honesty and connection that made all the difference. In the following weeks, David continued his therapy sessions with Dr. Marks, slowly unraveling the tangled web of his emotions. He also encouraged Jessica to seek therapy, knowing that they both needed support to heal. Jessica began seeing a counselor who specialized in trauma, and together they navigated the complex landscape of their recovery. One evening, as they were preparing dinner, Jessica turned to David with a thoughtful expression. David, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about facing our fears together, and I realized that I've been avoiding dealing with my own guilt and shame. I want to work through it, not just for me, but for us. David smiled, proud of her strength. That's a big step, Jessica. I am here for you every step of the way. Jessica took a deep breath. I know, and there's something else. I want to reach out to the other women who were hurt by Brian. I want to offer them support, maybe start a group where we can all help each other heal. David's heart swelled with admiration. That's a wonderful idea, Jessica. You have so much to offer, and it could make a real difference. As Jessica began organizing the support group, David noticed a positive change in her. She seemed more empowered, more at peace with herself. The group meetings became a source of strength and solidarity for all the women involved, and Jessica found a new sense of purpose in helping others. Meanwhile, the criminal case against Brian continued to move forward. The media coverage remained intense, but David and Jessica had learned to navigate it with grace and resilience. They became advocates for workplace safety and justice, using their experience to raise awareness and support others. One afternoon, David received a call from Detective Harris. David, I wanted to let you know that Brian has been officially charged and will be going to trial. It is a major step towards justice. David thanked the detective, feeling a mix of relief and anticipation. He shared the news with Jessica, and they both felt a sense of closure. The journey had been long and painful, but they were finally seeing the fruits of their labor. That evening, as they sat with their children, watching a movie and enjoying the simple pleasures of family life, David reflected on how far they had come. The scars of the past were still there, but they were healing, becoming part of the fabric of their story. David turned to Jessica, his heart full. We've come a long way, haven't we? Jessica smiled, leaning into him. Yes, we have, and I wouldn't have made it without you. David kissed her forehead, a sense of contentment settling over him. "We are a team, Jessica, and together we can face anything." As they watched their children laugh and play, David felt a deep sense of gratitude. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but he knew they would face them together, with love, honesty, and unwavering support. And in that moment, he knew they were stronger than ever, ready to embrace whatever the future held. The sun had barely risen when David Miller received a phone call that would alter the course of his investigation. He had been up late the previous night, going through documents and testimonies, trying to piece together the final strands of their case against Brian Carter. His phone buzzed on the bedside table, the screen flashing with Sam Reynolds' name. "David, we need to meet. I've found something significant." Sam's voice was urgent, cutting through the early morning haze. David's heart raced as he agreed to meet at their usual spot, Blue Ridge Diner. He quickly dressed and left a note for Jessica, who was still asleep, before heading out the door. At the diner, Sam was already waiting, a grim expression on his face. He had a folder in front of him, and as David sat down, he pushed it across the table. "What is this?" David asked, opening the folder. Sam leaned in, his voice low. "I did some deeper digging into Brian's past. I found out that he has been involved in similar incidents at his previous jobs. He has been quietly moved from one company to another, each time leaving behind a trail of harassment and manipulation. And there's more. I found out that his wife knew about his behavior and has been covering for him." David's eyes widened as he scanned the documents. His wife? Why would she do that? Sam sighed. "She is afraid of him. From what I gathered, he has been abusive towards her as well. She has been living in fear, covering for him to avoid his wrath." David felt a wave of anger and sorrow. "We need to help her. She is another victim in this mess." Sam nodded. "I agree. I have already reached out to a domestic violence advocate who can offer her support and protection, but we need to act fast. Brian's trial is coming up, and if we can get her to testify, it could be the nail in the coffin." David agreed, and they formulated a plan. Later that day, they met with the advocate and drove to Brian's house. David's heart pounded as they approached the door, uncertain of how this confrontation would unfold. Brian's wife, Laura, answered the door, her eyes wide with fear. "Who are you? What do you want?" David spoke gently. "Laura, my name is David Miller. This is Sam Reynolds. We are here to help you. We know what Brian has done, not just to you, but to many others. We have a support system ready for you, but we need your help to bring him to justice." Laura's eyes filled with tears, and she glanced nervously over her shoulder. I don't know. He'll kill me if he finds out." Sam stepped forward. "Laura, we have people who can protect you. You don't have to live in fear anymore. We need your testimony to ensure he is held accountable for his actions." Laura hesitated, her eyes darting back and forth. Finally, she nodded, her resolve hardening. "Okay, I'll do it. I can't live like this anymore." They quickly escorted Laura to a safe location, where the advocate took over. As David and Sam left, David felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. They had taken a significant step, but the battle was far from over. Back at home, David shared the developments with Jessica. Her eyes widened in shock as he recounted Laura's story. "That poor woman," Jessica said, tears in her eyes. "I can't believe she's been living like that." David took her hand, his voice steady. "We're going to make sure Brian pays for everything he's done, not just to us, but to everyone he has hurt." In the days leading up to the trial, the tension was palpable. David and Jessica prepared their testimonies, and Sam continued to gather evidence. Laura's decision to testify was a turning point, and her bravery inspired others to come forward as well. The trial began with a flurry of media attention. The courtroom was packed, the atmosphere electric with anticipation. David and Jessica sat side by side, their hands clasped together, ready to face Brian and the defense team. Brian entered the courtroom with a smug expression, but it faltered as he saw the array of evidence and witnesses lined up against him. The prosecution presented a compelling case, detailing his history of harassment and abuse. Laura's testimony was particularly powerful, her voice trembling as she recounted years of fear and manipulation. Brian S. defense team tried to discredit the witnesses, but the weight of the evidence was overwhelming. David and Jessica S. testimonies were clear and concise, painting a vivid picture of Brian S.'s predatory behavior. As the trial progressed, it became evident that Brian S.'s facade was crumbling. The media coverage intensified, with public opinion firmly against him. The judge listened intently, and as the final testimonies were presented, there was a palpable sense of justice in the air. Finally, after days of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted in a mix of relief and triumph. Brian was led away in handcuffs, his reign of terror finally over. Outside the courthouse, David and Jessica stood together, holding hands and facing the throng of reporters. David spoke briefly, expressing gratitude for the support they had received and emphasizing the importance of standing up against abuse and harassment. As they returned home, there was a sense of closure. They had fought a long and painful battle, but justice had been served. They knew there were still challenges ahead, but they were ready to face them together. That evening, they celebrated quietly with their children, enjoying a rare moment of peace and joy. As David watched his family, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. They had weathered the storm, and now they could finally begin to heal. David turned to Jessica, his heart full. "We did it, Jessica. We brought him down." Jessica smiled, her eyes shining with hope. "Yes, we did. And now we can move forward together." As they embraced, David knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, united in their love and commitment to each other. The road ahead was still uncertain, but they were ready to face it, hand in hand, one step at a time. The days following the trial were a whirlwind of emotions for David and Jessica Miller. The relief of seeing Brian Carter convicted was immense, but the reality of rebuilding their lives was just beginning. They had faced their demons, but now they had to navigate the aftermath. David decided to take some time off work to focus on his family and the new challenges ahead. The children were aware that something significant had happened, but David and Jessica had shielded them from the worst details. They wanted to provide a sense of normalcy amidst the upheaval. One morning, as David was making breakfast, he received a call from Detective Harris. "David, there is something you should know. We've discovered that Brian had accomplices within Carter Distribution. They helped him cover up his actions. We're relaunching an investigation, but I wanted to give you a heads up." David's grip tightened on the phone. "Thanks for letting me know, Detective. Do you think this could impact the case?" Harris sighed. "It might. But we are confident that with your help and the other testimonies, we can root out the corruption. It's going to be a long process." David hung up, his mind racing. He shared the news with Jessica, who looked troubled but resolute. "We need to see this through, David, for everyone involved." Determined to help, David reached out to the other victims and their families, coordinating efforts to provide evidence and support to the ongoing investigation. They held meetings, shared information, and built a network of solidarity and strength. One evening, as they were wrapping up a meeting at their house, Amanda, Jessica's sister, approached David. "David, there is something I need to tell you. I overheard a conversation at work. Some of Brian's old allies are planning to retaliate. They were desperate and might try to harm you or your family." David's heart pounded. "Are you sure, Amanda?" Amanda nodded, her expression serious. "Yes, you need to be careful. We all do." David took her warning to heart. He discussed the situation with Jessica, and they decided to take extra precautions. They installed security cameras around the house and informed the police of the potential threat. Despite the tension, David and Jessica tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for their children. They spent time together as a family, went on outings, and celebrated small victories. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. One night, as they were tucking the kids into bed, David received a call from Sam Reynolds. "David, I've uncovered something big. Brian's accomplices are planning to flee the country. We need to act fast." David's pulse quickened. "What do we do?" Sam's voice was calm but urgent. "I've alerted the authorities. We are setting up a sting operation to catch them before they can escape. I need you to stay safe and be ready to testify if needed." David agreed, feeling a mix of anticipation and anxiety. The next few days were tense, but the sting operation was successful. The accomplices were apprehended, and the corruption within Carter Distribution was exposed. As the investigation wrapped up, David and Jessica felt a sense of closure. They had faced their enemies and emerged victorious. The company underwent a complete overhaul, and new policies were put in place to protect employees and prevent future abuses. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Jessica turned to David with a thoughtful expression. "David, I've been thinking, what if we start an organization to support victims of workplace harassment? We've been through so much, and we could use our experience to help others." David smiled, pride swelling in his chest. "That is a great idea, Jessica. We could make a real difference." They began to outline their plans, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. They reached out to the other victims, inviting them to join their initiative. The response was overwhelmingly positive, and soon they had a dedicated team working towards their vision. As their organization took shape, David and Jessica found themselves busier than ever. They held workshops, provided legal assistance, and offered counseling services. Their efforts were recognized by the community, and they received numerous awards for their work. One day, as they were preparing for a major fundraising event, Jessica approached David with a smile. "David, I have some news. I am pregnant." David's eyes widened in surprise and joy. "That's incredible, Jessica. This is wonderful news." They embraced, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the new life they were bringing into the world. The challenges they had faced had strengthened their bond, and they were ready to welcome this new chapter with open hearts. As the months passed, their organization flourished, and their family grew. They faced the future with hope and determination, knowing that they had turned their pain into a force for good. Their story was one of resilience, love, and the power of standing up for what is right. David and Jessica Miller had weathered the storm and emerged stronger, ready to face whatever came next. Together, they had built a legacy of courage and compassion, and they knew that their journey was far from over. They were ready to embrace the future, hand in hand, one step at a time. The months following the climax of their ordeal were marked by both healing and new beginnings for David and Jessica Miller. Their advocacy organization, now named Voices of Justice, had grown rapidly, becoming a beacon of hope for victims of workplace harassment and abuse. The community's support was overwhelming, and the Millers were often invited to speak at events and share their journey. One crisp autumn morning, David and Jessica sat in their living room, reviewing plans for an upcoming workshop. The children were at school, and the house was filled with a peaceful silence. "David, we've come so far," Jessica said, her voice filled with emotion. "Sometimes I can't believe everything we've accomplished." David smiled, reaching for her hand. "We've done it together, Jessica, and we've turned something terrible into something positive. I am proud of us." Their moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Jessica opened it to find Amanda standing there, a wide grin on her face. "Amanda, come in," Jessica said, hugging her sister. Amanda entered, her excitement palpable. "I have some great news. I've been offered a job here in town, and I've decided to move closer to you guys. I want to be part of what you are doing with Voices of Justice." Jessica beamed. "That is fantastic. We'd love to have you here." David agreed, feeling grateful for Amanda's support. "Welcome aboard, Amanda. We are lucky to have you." As Amanda settled into her new role within the organization, David and Jessica found themselves more at ease. The added support allowed them to focus on their family and personal growth. Jessica's pregnancy was progressing smoothly, and the family eagerly anticipated the new addition. One evening, after a particularly successful fundraising event, David and Jessica sat on the porch, reflecting on their journey. "David, I've been thinking about the future," Jessica said, her voice soft. "We've built something incredible here, but I want to make sure we are also focusing on our family. I don't want to lose sight of what is most important." David nodded, understanding her concerns. "You are right, Jessica. We need to find a balance. Voices of Justice is important, but our family comes first." Jessica smiled, her eyes shining with love. Exactly. And with Amanda here, we can delegate more. We don't have to do everything ourselves. As the weeks turned into months, David and Jessica continued to grow both personally and professionally. They learned to delegate responsibilities within the organization, allowing them more time with their children and each other. The support group meetings flourished, and they launched several initiatives to provide legal aid and counseling to victims. One afternoon, while working in their home office, David received a call from a local news station. They wanted to feature Voices of Justice in an upcoming segment, highlighting the impact the organization had on the community. David and Jessica agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to reach more people in need. The news crew arrived a few days later, capturing footage of their workshops, support groups, and personal interviews with the Millers. During the interview, the reporter asked, "David, Jessica, what has been the most rewarding part of your journey with Voices of Justice?" David thought for a moment before replying, "Seeing the change in people's lives. Knowing that we've helped others find their voice and stand up for themselves. It is incredibly rewarding." Jessica nodded in agreement. "And it's given us a sense of purpose. Turning our pain into something positive has been healing for us, too." The news segment aired a week later, and the response was overwhelming. Donations poured in, and more victims reached out for help. Voices of Justice continued to grow, and the Millers became well-known advocates for workplace safety and justice. As Jessica's due date approached, the family prepared for the arrival of their newest member. The children were excited, often talking about their future sibling and helping to set up the nursery. One night, as David and Jessica lay in bed, Jessica turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "David, I've been thinking about names for the baby. What do you think of Grace for a girl and Nathan for a boy?" David smiled, loving the names she had chosen. "Grace and Nathan. I like them both. They are perfect." The following weeks were a whirlwind of final preparations. The family was ready, and when Jessica went into labor, they were surrounded by love and support. The birth was smooth, and they welcomed a healthy baby girl, whom they named Grace. As David held Grace in his arms for the first time, he felt an overwhelming sense of love and gratitude. This new life was a symbol of their resilience and the future they had fought so hard to build. Back at home, the family adjusted to their new dynamic. The children adored their baby sister, and the house was filled with laughter and joy. David and Jessica felt more connected than ever, their bond strengthened by the challenges they had overcome. One evening, as they sat together with Grace nestled between them, David looked at Jessica with a smile. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Jessica nodded, her eyes filled with tears of happiness. "Yes, we have, and I'm so grateful for every moment." David kissed her forehead, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "Me too, Jessica. Me too." As they watched their children play and enjoyed the simple pleasures of family life, David and Jessica knew that their journey was far from over. They had built a foundation of love, trust, and resilience, ready to face whatever the future held. Together, they had turned their pain into a force for good, creating a legacy of courage and compassion. And as they embraced the future, they knew that they were stronger than ever, ready to face life's challenges hand in hand, one step at a time. The sun was setting over the quiet neighborhood where David and Jessica Miller lived, casting a golden glow over their home. The past year had been a whirlwind of emotions, challenges, and triumphs. Voices of Justice had become a powerful force in the community, helping countless victims find their strength and reclaim their lives. One evening, as David sat on the porch watching the sunset, Jessica joined him, carrying baby Grace in her arms. She sat beside him and they shared a moment of peaceful silence, reflecting on their journey. "David," Jessica began softly, "I've been thinking about everything we've been through. It's incredible how far we've come." David nodded, his eyes never leaving the horizon. "It is. We've faced so much, but we've come out stronger. I'm proud of us." Jessica smiled, gently rocking Grace. "I am too, and I'm so grateful for our family for this new chapter we were living." David turned to her, his eyes filled with love. I couldn't have done it without you, Jessica. You've been my rock. Jessica leaned her head on his shoulder. And you've been mine, David. We've built something beautiful together. Their quiet moment was interrupted by the sound of laughter. Ethan, Olivia, and Ava came running into the backyard, their faces lit up with joy. Mom, Dad, come play with us, Ethan called, waving a soccer ball. David and Jessica exchanged a look, their hearts full. Let's go, David said, standing up and offering his hand to Jessica. They joined their children in the yard, laughter and happiness filling the air. The past year had been about rebuilding and healing, but it was also about rediscovering the joy of simple moments with their family. As the days turned into weeks, David and Jessica found a new rhythm in their lives. Voices of justice continued to thrive, and they balanced their work with the precious time they spent with their children. They celebrated each milestone with grace, cherishing every moment of her early years. One afternoon, David received an invitation to speak at a national conference on workplace safety and justice. It was a prestigious event, and he was honored to be recognized for their efforts. Jessica, they want me to speak at the conference in Washington, David said, holding the invitation. Jessica's eyes lit up. That's amazing, David. You deserve it. We both do. David smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. We'll go together. It'll be a great opportunity for us and for voices of justice. The conference was a resounding success. David and Jessica's presentation was met with standing ovations and heartfelt applause. They shared their story, the challenges they faced, and the victories they achieved. Their message of resilience and justice resonated with many, inspiring others to take action in their own communities. After the conference, David and Jessica returned home, feeling invigorated and hopeful for the future. They continued to expand voices of justice, reaching more victims and providing essential support. One evening, as they were preparing dinner, Amanda arrived with exciting news. I've been offered a position on the board of a national organization focused on ending workplace harassment. They want to partner with Voices of Justice. Jessica's eyes widened with excitement. That's fantastic, Amanda. This is a huge step forward. David agreed, feeling proud of their accomplishments. It is a testament to all the hard work we've put in. We are making a real difference. As they celebrated Amanda's news, David and Jessica reflected on their journey. They had turned their pain into a force for good, creating a lasting impact on their community and beyond. One quiet evening, after the children were asleep, David and Jessica sat together on the porch, holding hands and watching the stars. David, Jessica said softly, do you ever think about what our life would be like if none of this had happened? David considered her question. Sometimes, but then I realized that everything we've been through has brought us to where we are now. We've grown so much and we've helped so many people. I wouldn't change a thing. Jessica nodded, her eyes shining with emotion. I feel the same way. We've built something incredible out of our struggles, and I know we'll keep moving forward together. David kissed her forehead, feeling a deep sense of contentment. Together, Jessica. Always. As they sat in the quiet of the night, they knew that their journey was far from over. There would be new challenges, new victories, and new moments of joy. But they were ready to face them, hand in hand, with love and resilience guiding their way. David and Jessica Miller had weathered the storm and emerged stronger, their bond unbreakable. They looked to the future with hope and determination, knowing that they had created a legacy of courage, compassion, and justice. And as they embraced the future, they were ready to face whatever came next, one step at a time. Thank you for listening to this story. Subscribe to my channel, put a like under the video, and write a comment about how you like this story and what stories you want to hear.